Oh, Christ. It is what it is. Hi guys, so new hair, even though it may not look like it. It's like a reddish purple, like she called it eggplant color on the top, and then black, although you may never be able to tell because I can't, and blue on the bottom. It's like black with blue mixed in there. Because I wanted blue highlights, and I was like, can you do that? And she's like, let's just mix the blue in there. It's like Santa. I know it's there, even if I can't see it. Also, what is new is I gave up on Emma. So, here's my review for December? November? Lady Spies Book Club. So, I got about halfway through Emma. Like, exactly halfway. And then I started racking up library fines, and I couldn't renew the book anymore, so I tried one more time, like, sitting down, hunkering down and reading it, and I got, like, 2 sentences in, and I'm like, I can't, I'm done. I give up the ghost with this book. So, the plot. This is what I can tell you of the plot up to a certain point. There's a girl, Emma Woodhouse, and she's a bitch. And she lives with her father, who's a hypochondriac shut-in, who sounds more interesting than he is. He's mainly annoying. She had a nanny named Mrs. Weston, who recently got married and moved out, obviously. And she had an older sister who got married and had a bunch of kids. Her last name is now Mrs. Knightley because her husband's name is Mr. Knightley. Mr. Knightley has a brother also named Mr. Knightley, but it's different, like John or something. He comes into play later. Although, I don't really realize it until, I guess, after the point that I stopped reading. Emma befriends this girl named Harriet, and she takes her under her wing and is like, oh, I'm gonna teach you all about everything ever. And Harriet's like, that's cool. So Harriet comes to her and is like, oh my god, I fell in love with this guy who's a farmer, and he wants to marry me. And Emma's like, ew, no, you cannot accept his marriage proposal. So Harriet's like, oh, okay, I guess, sorry, farmer boy, I'm not gonna marry you. So he's just like, okay. And Mr. Knightley is like, is one of Emma's only critics, and he's like, Emma, you're an idiot. He's actually not just a farmer, he's a little bit more well-to-do than that, and he has like a substantial endowment, and he's set, you know? That was really retarded of you to tell her to reject the proposal. And Emma's like, whatever. So then there's this guy, Mr. Elton, and Emma's like, okay, Harriet, I'm totally gonna set you up with this guy. And Harriet's like, oh, sweet, okay, I guess I'm in love with him. So they all start hanging out together, Emma and Harriet and Mr. Elton. They're coming home from a party or something, and Mr. Elton confesses his feelings for Emma, and Emma's like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be in love with Harriet. Harriet's in love with you. And he's like, she's socially inferior to me. I don't want any of that shit. And Emma's like, well then, I don't know what to tell you, man, but I'm not feeling it for you. So Mr. Elton runs off and gets engaged, as is the way of Jane Austen characters that are male. Runs off and gets engaged to somebody else. There's also another character who's this orphan pretty girl named Jane Fairfax, who Emma's, like, sworn frenemies with. She doesn't really like her, but she pretends to like her. Everybody is, like, in love with Jane. Enter onto the scene Frank Churchill, who is Emma's brother-in-law's son from a previous marriage. He comes in, and everyone expects her and him to hook up, and okay, that's vlog. And him and her, like, kind of bash on Jane together. She's like, okay, maybe I have feelings for them, as they kind of hang out together while he's visiting. Then he goes off. He has an aunt that he lives with who's, like, a mean old biddy who's really rich, and he kind of has to do whatever she says because she's loaded, and he doesn't want to be disinherited. So while he's back home kissing his aunt's ass, Emma's like, I don't know if I really have feelings for him like I thought. This is the part of the book where I stopped reading and turned to Wikipedia to sort out the rest of it, to kind of plow on and figure out what the ending is. So even though Emma should have learned the first time with meddling with setting people up, she decides to go ahead and, well, I don't really have feelings for Frank, so I'm going to put him off onto Harriet. So she tries to get them to hook up, and I guess Frank at some point saves her from a band of gypsies, Harriet. And then there's speculation in the background that Mr. Knightley has feelings for Jane, and Harriet and Emma's all like, oh no, Mr. Knightley isn't marrying anybody, especially Jane. Apparently Jane finds out about this and is really mad about it, and Mr. Knightley finds out about this, about Emma bad-mouthing both of them, and is really mad about it too. And so she's like, okay, well, I'll go and apologize to Jane. But Jane's like, I'm not having any of your shit, bitch, and won't see her. While this is going on, Frank Churchill's aunt has died. This comes the news that secretly Frank and Jane have been engaged for like a while. They had to hide it from the aunt because she wouldn't approve and she would disinherit Frank Churchill. But then there's this new uncle who gets a hold of the fortune. He's like, I don't care what you do. Here's your money. Go get married. So Emma goes to tell Harriet, oh crap, the guy that I was trying to fix you up with, that I think you have feelings for, Frank, is engaged. So she goes to tell her, and Harriet's all like, I'm okay with that. I don't really like him. I actually have feelings for Mr. Knightley. Emma suddenly is all like, oh hell no. I suddenly realized after all this time that I'm in love with him, and I didn't really ever know or realize it because he's the only one who ever puts me in my place. So everybody thought that Emma was gonna be heartbroken over the Frank thing because everybody thought that Emma was in love with him. So Mr. Knightley comes over and tries to console her, and she's like, I'm in love with you. And he's like, oh my god, I'm actually in love with you too, even though you're a rancid bitch. And so even though the entire book, Emma is dead set against marrying and doesn't believe in it and thinks she's gonna be a singleton forever, Mr. Knightley proposes and she accepts. So when she tells Harriet's all like, I'm not that upset about it because, Mr. Elton and I have kind of worked things out and he proposed to me and I accepted, so everything's good. So everybody all gets their little matches in the end, even though it's weird. So, opinions. Where do I begin? I've realized now that I hate Jane Austen. She's not my cup of tea, and I'm gonna piss off a lot of Jane Austenites who worship at her boring feet, but I don't like her. I tried Sense and Sensibility and Emma, and the only way I can tolerate Jane Austen is if a brilliant vlogbrother is redoing her books into different forms of media. However, there were some improvements between Emma and Sense and Sensibility, partly because I think that Sense and Sensibility was her first novel, and she kind of polished up her act between these two books. But she kind of makes the characters are still pretty convoluted. It's really hard to figure out who's who, but she tries in the beginning to kind of sort out everybody, even though she does it with like the minor characters who don't really matter. Also, she deliberately wanted to write a book where the main character was somebody that like nobody will like, which I think is interesting because people don't usually do that with books. Also, what I think is interesting is that usually in these kind of romantic books, the character, once they get a guy, they start falling for them. That's it, they're done. Get the ring on my finger, we're in love. But I thought it was kind of interesting how when she thought she started to fall for Frank and he left, she kind of examined her feelings. It was like, I don't really feel in love with him like I should. Instead of just being like, okay, I've got my dress on, let's go to the chapel right now. Different lighting. But something else that bothers me with Jane Austen, aside from her writing style, is that she kind of recycles the same themes over and over. Like, there's usually a love-hate relationship. If there is, people fall for each other. Usually somebody runs off as soon as they're rejected and gets engaged. There's a clandestine engagement between two characters. Oh. And then this one, they didn't have one, but usually there's a two-timing cad. It just kind of bothers me how she kind of keeps recycling the same plot points, like, over and over. So that concludes my final pick for the Lady Spies Book Club. Also my foray into the world of Jane Austen. Hope we get to do this again sometime. And, I love you guys. Bye.